Okay, AOC finally responded proudly concerning a high school yearbook photo that proves she grew up in a wealthy suburb. She said, "See, I told you I went to high school."
And I can tell you, I know that when I was waitressing and struggling to put food on the table, for a while there, I did. I tried to stop caring. I tried to just keep my head down, work my shifts, and accept that this is just how things are. But that is no way to live, Arizona. It's no way to live. What I do know is that we don't have to live like this. And in fact, we cannot live like this anymore.
Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly just took AOC's political circus and burned the tent down. With razor-sharp wit and savage precision, they exposed her grandstanding, viral virtue signaling, and empty theatrics like never before. From TikTok tantrums to fantasy economics, nothing was safe. This roast wasn't just brutal, it was a public unraveling of the facade AOC built on hashtags and hashtags alone. If you thought AOC had comebacks, think again. This takedown left her speechless and exposed.
This nonsense from AOC that he should be impeached is just absurd. Absurd. There's no... Okay, get back to me when you've read the Constitution or get a law degree, because you sound like an... There is absolutely no ground to impeach the president. He 100% was within his constitutional authority and his congressionally authorized authority to do what he did on Saturday.
AOC. What? She's kind of fun in a silly but earnest, wrong but adorable way. She's like your daughter when she comes back from her first year at Brown, full of half-baked, half opinions, in need of some gentle, patient deprogramming. But people have to realize new faces doesn't mean new ideas. Drives me crazy. AOC has never introduced a fresh idea or issue in her life.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to warm up before diving into his roast of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The mere mention of her name was like pressing a big red comedy button for him. Gutfeld lit up, as if someone had handed him a golden script marked unlimited material. To him, AOC wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a walking, talking political sketch comedy that accidentally got elected and forgot to turn the laugh track off.
She's like an 80-year-old leftist in a used bookstore. I mean, she may look fresh, but she's as stale as an abandoned futon on the street. It's like, I listen to her, I go, I heard that at Berkeley in 1983. So their problem is, and the reason why they don't have any ideas is they operate on half opinions. Like, what?
He kicked things off by marveling at her uncanny ability to treat every Instagram live like it was a State of the Union address for cats and ring lights. Gutfeld said AOC could be surrounded by literal experts and still manage to emerge from the conversation with a fresh batch of poorly digested buzzwords. He claimed her takes were like microwaved leftovers from a college activism rally, reheated just enough to smell political, but never quite safe to consume.
So by now you heard that AOC, among others, were arrested last night. She truly is an American hero. It was brutal, taken out in cuffs. Well, technically, her shirt had cuffs. Maybe French cuffs, as she did surrender without fighting.
Greg roasted her obsession with drama, saying AOC viewed every hallway on Capitol Hill like it was a catwalk, and every disagreement like a televised meltdown opportunity. According to him, she approached legislation the same way a reality show contestant approaches a group challenge, loud, confused, and somehow convinced she's the hero, even when the kitchen's on fire.
As for whether it's a good idea, that's a debate we should be having. And look, if we could get congressional approval of the specific action, fine, I'm okay with that too. If you want to bring it to Congress, go ahead and see how that goes. I don't think it's necessary, but...
As for whether it's a good idea, that's a debate we should be having. And look, if we could get congressional approval of the specific action, fine. I'm okay with that too. If you want to bring it to Congress, go ahead and see how that goes. I don't think it's necessary. But then came the policy part. Gutfeld gleefully dissected AOC's most ambitious ideas, calling them a mix between utopian fiction and economic sabotage. He joked that the Green New Deal read like a 7th grader's science project written the night before, full of glitter, poster board, and no real math. He compared her policy work to assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions, and then yelling at the chair when it collapses.
Oh, let's do it. What happens? You have repeat criminals wreaking havoc. What if we have sanctuary cities? Hey, let's do it. What happens? Finding sanctuary, safe haven. What if we give trans rights? Oh, you just ruin women's sports. You ruin safe spaces. You make kids' lives hell. But
he also had a field day with her constant social media activity. Greg said AOC spent more time making videos than a full-time influencer, but with the added twist of not being influenced by facts. He imagined her staff meetings as a mix of filters, slogans, and someone yelling about carbon emissions while taking selfies in an SUV. And the tears, oh, the tears. Gutfeld couldn't resist bringing up AOC's flair for public emotion. He described how she turned every vote she didn't like into a Shakespearean tragedy, complete with shaky voice and dramatic pauses. According to Greg, if AOC didn't get her way, it wasn't just a policy disagreement. It was the fall of Rome, with better lighting. Meanwhile, on another platform, Megyn Kelly took her turn with surgical precision. Where Gutfeld brought the fire, Megyn brought the scalpel. She didn't shout, didn't sneer. She just dismantled AOC like someone peeling layers off an onion, each one more terror-inducing than the last. Megyn began by addressing the illusion of AOC's intellect, the way she rattled off half-digested talking points with the confidence of someone who just skimmed a Wikipedia article and mistook it for a PhD. She pointed out that AOC's speeches often had more emotional charge than intellectual structure, like a motivational poster that somehow got elected.
There's a beautiful little town called Yorktown Heights in Westchester. It's not the fanciest of Westchester towns, but it ain't the Bronx by any measure. And the reason this is relevant is because a congresswoman who you may know as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been telling us for years that she is from the Bronx. And recently she had a fight with President Trump over tweet, text, truth, whatever. And she played tough and said, "Oh, don't you mess with me. I'm a Bronx girl. And we eat Queens boys for breakfast."
Kelly mocked the tendency to use moral outrage as a substitute for data, explaining how AOC treats every disagreement not as a difference of opinion, but as proof that someone's a villain. According to Megyn, the world doesn't operate in good guys versus bad guys, but AOC never got that memo, likely because she was too busy staging another protest in her own office. Then came the performance politics. Megyn said AOC didn't legislate, she live-streamed. She didn't debate, she performed. Megyn painted her as someone who came to Congress with a script, a spotlight, and no real plan beyond collecting likes. She described how AOC treated press conferences like audition tapes for a dramatic role that doesn't exist outside her imagination. Kelly roasted the environmental posturing, too, questioning how someone so obsessed with saving the planet could rack up more frequent flyer miles than a touring DJ. She said AOC's climate rhetoric had all the depth of a bumper sticker and the consistency of a weather forecast written in crayon. She then moved on to AOC's fondness for outrage, how every headline became a personal crusade, every dissenting voice an existential threat. Megyn said AOC treats public policy like a never-ending social justice slam poetry night, with each line more exaggerated than the last.
But if her pants had cuffs, she would have pretended to be in leg irons too. But real handcuffs, not so much. But that didn't stop her from pretending, and I hate it when people do this to me. When I ask people to put on handcuffs and they say, "I'll just pretend I have them on," I'd be like, "Sure, and I'll pretend to pay you after."
And Megyn couldn't resist poking fun at AOC's frequent references to her humble beginnings, joking that AOC has managed to stretch her former bartender job into the political version of a Marvel origin story. She said AOC talks about it like she invented struggle, and Megyn half expected her next campaign slogan to be, "From cocktails to Congress, a revolution in heels." Back to Gutfeld, who wasn't ready to let up. He moved on to AOC's media battles, especially her long-running feud with reality. He joked that AOC seemed to believe being questioned was the same as being persecuted. Every fact check was treated like a federal crime against her feelings. Greg said she handled criticism with the grace of a toddler denied candy, loud, indignant, and completely sure she was the victim. He laughed at how AOC had built a brand around being the voice of the people, while somehow managing to avoid most of the actual people. According to Gutfeld, AOC's idea of constituents included Twitter activists, TikTok philosophers, and climate protesters glued to sidewalks. He questioned how someone so focused on working families spent so much time playing dress-up for magazine covers. Greg then jabbed at AOC's red carpet appearances. He mocked the famous dress moments, describing them as fashion statements with the subtlety of a jackhammer.
And respectfully, AOC, well, that's real cute, except she only lived in the Bronx until she was age 5, when at best you're in usually kindergarten, maybe first grade. And she spent the rest of her childhood, 1 through 12th grade, in Yorktown Heights, which is Westchester. And by any measure, it is richer, nicer, and more white collar than the Bronx, with all due respect to my friends in the Bronx.
He claimed AOC tried to play Robin Hood in designer shoes, stealing attention from real issues while giving speeches that sounded like tweets run through a thesaurus. Meanwhile, Megyn returned to her analysis of AOC's contradictions. She noted how AOC preaches empowerment while constantly declaring herself powerless, demands accountability while evading it, and insists on transparency while dodging every tough interview that doesn't include pre-approved questions. According to Megyn, AOC mastered the art of playing both the revolutionary and the victim, depending on which camera angle worked better. Megyn zeroed in on AOC's tendency to simplify complex issues into viral one-liners. She explained how nuanced debates were reduced to slogans, and how anyone asking for specifics was treated like an enemy of progress. She said AOC talked about capitalism like it was Voldemort, and treated every economic question like a chance to blame billionaires and dodge arithmetic. She highlighted AOC's flair for building movements with zero infrastructure and revolutions with no logistics. According to Megyn, AOC treated politics like a college club. Big plans, lots of posters, and no follow-through after the people.
Of course, AOC was mocked on social media for imitating being handcuffed, which is a change from her usually being mocked for imitating a congresswoman. That's not even close to being as disgusting as I can be. She, in fact, was gingerly escorted away to a holding area where she kept up the phony display before finally raising her fist to supporters. She then crossed her wrists behind her back, again in the faux handcuffed position. It's as tall a tale as AOC nearly being killed on January.
Gutfeld came back swinging, calling AOC the queen of delayed revelations. He said she had a knack for remembering trauma only after it became a trending topic. He mocked her sudden flashbacks, which always seemed conveniently timed to coincide with new legislation or media coverage. He joked that if there were an award for best political improv drama, AOC would win it every time, and thank herself in the acceptance speech. He also ridiculed her takes on international policy, saying AOC's foreign affairs strategy boiled down to feel bad, blame America, demand change, offer no plan. Greg imagined her trying to solve world crises with inspirational quotes and vegan recipes. Back to Megyn, who examined AOC's transformation from activist to establishment darling, without ever admitting the shift. She said AOC wanted the perks of rebellion and the privileges of power, all while pretending to be outside the very system she campaigned to run. According to Megyn, it was the political equivalent of crashing a party and then complaining about the music you chose.
And now some of her schoolmates, separate and apart from Benny, are weighing in on her claims. I'll get to the Benny thing in one second, but there was a piece in the New York Post talking about how she's embarrassing herself. She's embarrassing herself now with this Bronx girl.
Interview. She mocked the photo ops, the curated outrage, and the revolving door of controversies that always ended with a tearful video and a fundraising link. Megyn said AOC had turned congressional work into a performance series, with each episode starring her as the misunderstood heroine bravely standing up to reality. Both Gutfeld and Kelly agreed on one thing: AOC wasn't an accidental phenomenon. She was a carefully crafted brand, wrapped in authenticity, sold as a revolution, and ultimately powered by Wi-Fi. They didn't see her as dangerous. They saw her as predictable, a script with costume changes, a protest sign, and designer boots. Greg joked that if you gave AOC a week to write a bill, she'd return with a spoken word poem and a playlist. He imagined her trying to pass legislation using nothing but glitter pens and TikTok clips. According to him, AOC didn't represent the future. She represented the moment when politics swiped left on substance. Megyn, ever sharp, concluded her roast with a prediction. AOC's biggest threat wasn't opposition, it was time. Because eventually, slogans fade, hashtags disappear, and people start asking for results. And when that moment comes, AOC will realize that likes don't pass laws, retweets don't fix infrastructure, and no amount of crying on camera substitutes for doing the actual work.
AOC was on 60 Minutes last night. Quite a feat for a newcomer. Must be all her great new ideas.
People are going to have to start paying their fair share in taxes. Once you get to like the tippy tops, on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%.
What an expression. Now, the real story isn't AOC's very old ideas. It's the media's gushy view of her. Even with her old ideas, she gets on 60.
They both left the door open because this wasn't the end of the roast. AOC was still on the stage, still performing, still collecting applause from people who hadn't read the script. And as long as she kept speaking, Gutfeld and Kelly would be there, sharpening their jokes, sipping their coffee, and waiting for the next scene to begin. Gutfeld jumped right back in, pointing out that AOC's biggest achievement so far was turning every policy conversation into an episode of performative political theater. He said, "She didn't just miss the point. She brought props, costumes, and a speech that somehow always ended in applause from people who weren't paying attention." According to Greg, AOC could turn a pothole complaint into a national referendum on feelings, inequality, and whether or not the asphalt had...
Let's check in on AOC and see what she has to say.
Any quick reaction on what's going on with Elon Musk and President Trump on Twitter right now?
Oh, man, the girls are fighting, aren't they? I think this breakup we've been seeing a long time coming, but we'll see what the impacts are of it legislatively.
Okay. You're so cool referring to them as the girls. She's above it all, Ben. That's what she's trying to telegraph. You see, she's the adult in the room, the one out there who does a preacher accent. And she leans into her fake Latina accent. And like, she's the adult in the...
He took special aim at her leadership moments, saying that every time there was a serious crisis, AOC showed up late, underprepared, and overly dramatic. He compared her approach to a fireman showing up to a blaze with a scented candle and a vlog camera. He said she was more interested in crafting the story than solving the problem, and her followers ate it up like political popcorn. Megyn Kelly stepped back in with another surgical jab, focusing on AOC's instinct to moralize every issue while completely missing the practical side. She said AOC was the kind of leader who could guilt you into recycling a straw while flying private to her next speaking gig. Megyn mocked her selective outrage, her tendency to erupt over internet trends,